guys, BionicleSaurus here, and welcome back to another dinosaur figure review. And in this video, we are going to be taking a look at the deluxe Acrocanthosaurus by CollectA. If you've already seen my CollectA Acrocanthosaurus review, this one isn't going to differ that much. And if anything, there's actually more issues with this figure than the car. But without further ado, there are some good things to talk about when it comes to this model, this replica, so let's get started. Starting in with the overall appearance, this figure's overall look is incredibly similar to that of the Acrocanthosaurus, for sure. I mean, it has that same look of a really large Acrocanthosaurid, or Carnosaur, and honestly, I mean, there isn't too much different to say. It's clearly walking forward, maybe stalking, maybe actually chasing after something. That kind of depends on how you position the mouth, and that is one different thing about this figure, is it has an articulated jaw, so you can have it closed or open or anywhere in between. That is a nice feature. The articulated jaw itself feels a little cheaply made, like the joint, just none of it feels as sturdy as, say, one of Papo's or one of the Schleich World of History figures' moving jaws. I think those two companies have mastered that more, and I just realized he wasn't in the frame. There you go. So yeah, that is nice. Overall, though, I mean, this figure looks good. It looks like a big, fierce predator. He has the standard dinky predator arms, which we'll get into later. I mean, there isn't too much to say. The color scheme is probably a lot more striking, in my opinion, than that of the Acrocanthosaurus. It's a lot of different tans and greens and things mixing together, some yellows in there, some orange on the head, and some tiny bits of really bright orange on top of the head, going all the way down on these little spines down the back. And then his claws are kind of a very dark, sort of metallic gray almost, and the inside of the mouth is pink and the teeth are white, and the eyes are black. So that's the whole color scheme there. And I like it. It's a little more complicated. There's a lot more different shades and a lot more going on. A lot more complexity with the colors and how they're all interacting, all the different hues and everything. So that's pretty cool. And yes, overall appearance, I mean, it looks really good. Just kind of glancing at the figure, it looks impressive. So, in conclusion, for his overall look, I'm going to rate this figure at about an A. I think the color scheme is really great. The pose is dynamic enough without being so specific or in action as to make it unplayable. And I think he would have been an A-, but that moving jaw really adds something, in my opinion. I always like when companies feature in that bit of articulation. It's always nice to see that. Moving on to detail, and with my new Canon PowerShot SX530HS, we will be able to get a close-in-focus, crisp look at all of the detail for the first time in these reviews. And yes, I am just going to go ahead and just brag about my camera. It's awesome. Alright, so let's start with the head. So, as you can see, the head has quite a lot of detail going on, a lot of big, like, bony ridges and stuff over the eyes, which is, nice to see that they didn't just go one kind of monotone shape and size of scale. They actually tried to differ it a lot, which I like. The teeth are really nice, the way they're individually sculpted. I think it is an upgrade from the Acrocanthosaurus teeth. They look a little more curved and just like they put more effort into them. One place where detail is not that great is the inside of that movable mouth, if I can move my light over to show that. Darn it, let's try the other light. There, you can kind of see it if it'll focus in. Focus. Focus. Yeah, okay, you can kind of see the tongue and everything. Let me try zooming out a little. Still learning this thing. There you go. So yes, the tongue looks fine. The little bits of cheek flesh that are standard on most theropods look fine. It's just when you actually really look down the gullet of this thing, you can see that the pink painting actually stops, and you can kind of see where the articulation is kind of jointed and everything. Let me see if I can get a shot of that real quick. There we go. You can see clearly now how at the back of the mouth You can see it looks like the tongue is actually a separate piece that is glued on or maybe molded on. And then you can see where the pink stops and it turns to just that light tan color in there. And in person, I'd say it's even worse. It's just on the lower jaw. The upper jaw, let me see if I can turn this around and show you. Yeah, there you go. You can see the upper jaw is nicely detailed inside, but you can just see that little strip of tan back there and where the tongue clearly kind of attaches and ends. So that's a bit annoying, especially when it couldn't have been that hard to just paint that extra bit pink or mold it in pink and paint the rest of the lower jaw the colors that it is. It already looks like it has a lot of different paint going on, so I don't really understand the reason for that, to be honest, and that's a serious con in my opinion. The detail on the rest of the body is quite good. All the claws on the hands and the feet are well defined and well sculpted. It's a huge step up from the Acrocanthosaurus, who, if you'll remember, I wasn't a huge fan of his detail. While his head was well sculpted and whatnot, the rest of his body looked a bit lackluster with a lot of big, ugly, simple scales, but this guy has much more intricate texturing. I mean, you can see it, and just take a look at it here. It is certainly a big improvement. I think they've taken a model, the Acrocanthosaurus, and they have really improved it with this Acrocanthosaurus. You can see it has some large osteoderms going down the side, and they go pretty much all the way down about halfway into the tail and then disappear. You can see the nice ridge along the back, hence the name Acrocanthosaurus. Oh my goodness, everything looks really nice detail-wise. It's certainly not as good as, say, Safari Limited figure. I mean, there are portions where it doesn't look as good, like the belly. The belly, for the most part, looks fine, but the tail down the middle, they gave it that kind of crocodilian, those really wide ventral scoots, which is a bit annoying. They did include a cloaca, which I've kind of come to expect from CollectA now, but it's still nice to see. I mean, it looks really nice for the most part, and there really isn't too much to complain about. So, overall for detail on this figure, I give it around an A-. I think I'm tempted to give it lower just because certain areas are kind of bad, like the underside of the tail, and there are certain other areas, like on the legs, where the scalation is a bit less well-defined and well done. But for the most part, I'd say, even though it's not perfect, it's such a big improvement over the Acrocanthosaurus' detail, I have to rate it pretty high. The only real thing that's keeping it down from an A is the inside of the mouth, which we, of course, covered in detail just a second ago. So, yes, an A- for detail on this figure. Pretty good. Now it's time to talk about the category where this figure kind of loses some momentum, and that would be scientific accuracy. Now, this figure has a lot going for it. Let's see. The hands aren't pronated. He's not a tripod, which is wonderful. I really am appreciating how well CollectA's figures are standing, and they aren't even using the classic cheat of enlarging the feet. Not at all. They stand like the real animal would have, and that is great to see. But he does have his fair share of issues. Let's first talk about the ones that he kind of shares with the Car. Mainly he's got the signature CollectA fat hips, wide upper legs. Sorry if you can hear my cat in the background. Anyway, and you know, that's a pity, but I think that is a little bit for stability perhaps, but I think mostly it's just kind of how they're sculpting these big theropods. And you know, I've kind of come to terms with that. What's worse, in my opinion, and this was on the Car as well, but I think it's more pronounced on this figure, is the leg proportions. The thigh is fine, and the third section and the foot are fine, but this middle section, and let me adjust my lighting here, but that middle section, that calf and shin, as it technically is far too short and not very muscular. It should be thicker, and it should go like to here and then bend down. Like it's way too short, and it gives them these dinky kind of unmuscular, short, oddly misproportioned legs, and that's a bit of a pity. So now let's get into some Acrocanthosaurus specific inaccuracies, ones that the Car didn't have. The skull, to me, is a bit too elongated. When you're talking about Acrocanthosaurus, which was just getting close to those more advanced Carcharodontosaurids, but it was in the very early segment of the Cretaceous, and it still had a slightly wider, taller skull, more like an Allosaurus or a Sinraptor, those older carnosaurs, and, you know, it was certainly thinner than those ones, but it's not, I feel like they made it too elongated. It looks more like one of those really more advanced carnosaurs like Giganotosaurus or Tyrannotitan or something, and it's just a little too skinny, I guess. The ridge, they went for that kind of thin sail, really, really thin, delicate-looking ridge, if you can see just how thin it is from the top. And that's not necessarily inaccurate, but these days, normally it's reconstructed with more of a thick hump that goes along kind of the neck and the tail as well. If you look at the Rebor, I very rarely praise Rebor figures, but I think the Rebor Acrocanthosaurus did that better. They gave him much more this thick, muscular kind of hump, whereas here they gave him that thin spine, and I'm not exactly a fan. It's a bit dated. But the worst issue on this figure is actually, and let me just zoom in here, the hands. Well, more the arms, actually. The arms are definitely a bit on the short side, and they're just a little dinky and not very muscular. Especially this one, the forearm on his left arm here is decent, but the right arm has it even worse. Look at that dinky little thing. And, you know, it's not like these guys had huge arms, but these are verging on T-Rex arms here. I mean, they're getting there. They aren't there yet, but they're close. And that's really not right. It was fine for the Acrocanthosaurus because, once again, that's kind of a trait found in a lot of the more advanced carnosaurs, but Acrocanthosaurus still preserved some more Allosaurus-like arms. They would have been longer, more muscular, and this is my big issue, they would have had the enlarged claw on the first finger, which is not present in any shape or form. They just completely ignored that. It's not on either of the hands. All the claws and fingers are the same tiny little size, and they should all be thicker and more muscular, especially that first finger should have that big hook claw, you know, and that is just not there at all. So, for scientific accuracy, I give this figure a C+. It's just, I mean, it really does have a lot going for it, especially compared to, like, some of Schleik's figures or Rebor figures these days, especially the JW figures, although I don't even really count those. They're, as figures are more toys, but still, it has a lot of issues, and with some of CollectA's other figures, like the new T-Rex, having such good accuracy, it's disappointing to see them still getting stuck with some of these really kind of odd things to mess up. One thing I forgot to mention, his head, as you can see, is quite shrink-wrapped. It's not as bad as the Car, but it's pretty evident. All the fenestrae and the orbit are really like, we are here. So that is another issue. But still, I mean, there isn't too much blaringly wrong, you know? It's not like we're looking at, say, the Carnegie Acrocanthosaurus. Now, that's a figure I don't have and do not plan on ever wanting, but you know, this figure, the Batat one is better, the Wild Safari one is better, the Rebor one is better, but this one is better than a lot of the other Acrocanthosauruses out there. So, it does have its issues, but overall for scientific accuracy, it does have a lot of good things going on as well. Alright, ladies and gents, it is time for the overall rating of this figure. So, for the deluxe 140-ish scale Acrocanthosaurus by CollectA, however you want to say it, I give this figure a B-. If I remember correctly, that's pretty much the same rating I gave to the Car, and it's pretty much here for the exact same reasons. It has some really odd and surprising accuracy issues, but a lot of really positive things to say about accuracy. It has a nice overall look to it, but, you know, there are some certain things to complain about. The detail is really good in spots, but there are other areas that just seem neglected. Overall, I think if I were to describe this figure and the Car and some of their other large theropods in one word, it would just be inconsistency. Because there are elements that are really, really great and other elements that are kind of falling off the rails. And so overall, while this figure is, I'd say, an improvement upon the Carcharodontosaurus in a lot of ways, it's also a downgrade in a lot of ways. So in the end, I really wouldn't give it any lower, but I also wouldn't give it any higher. B- seems just perfect for this figure. Thanks for watching, and BionicleSaurus signing out.